In this episode, we talk about the latest developments in China-US relations. We also talk about a train collision that killed 8 people in Chhattisgarh's Bilaspur. But we begin today by talking about Canada rejecting a massive number of Indian student visa applications. Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to 3 Things, the Indian Express news show. For over a decade, Canada has been one of the go-to destinations for Indian students who have consistently formed the largest group of international students there. But this year, a significantly large number of them were left disheartened after their visas were denied by the Canadian government. In fact, the number of students whose visa was rejected went up to 74% this year.
So in August, 74% of people, Indian students who applied for a student permit visa, they were denied the visa.
That's the Indian Express's Manraj, Grewal, Sharma.
So there were about 4,515 applications filed by Indian students and only a little over 1,000 were approved. So this is a huge drop compared to 2023 when Indian students made up for more than 1/4 of all international applicants and they were largely successful with a rejection rate of only 34%. So till 2 years back, the rejection was very low. This year, it's been particularly high.
Now, this decline began about 2 years ago after India-Canada relations hit a rough patch. But this year, Manraj writes, the steep drop in acceptances is largely because Canada is overhauling its immigration policy. In this segment, we talk to Manraj about these policy changes, the reasons behind it, and how it is affecting Indian students. So Manraj, 74% is a sharp drop. Do we know why this is happening? Why is Canada changing its immigration policy?
I think it started in 2023 when Canada realized that it has too many international students. So there was a housing crisis. The rentals, they spiraled because there was more demand and lesser supply. Then they also found that most of the international students not only studied there, but would also pick up jobs on the side or after graduation and post-graduation. And these students, especially Indian students, would work for a lower rate, lower salary, and they would work as temporary employees. And that kind of squeezed the Canadian students looking for, say, part-time jobs or holiday jobs out of the market. So there was this backlash of sorts, blaming international students for all the ills plaguing the housing market, the employment market, and which is when the government took a decision to cut down on the number of international students, especially from India. So the international student cap was lowered this year to 437,000 permits, which was a 10% reduction from last year and over 35% from the years before that. And secondly, there was also this issue of fraud. So in 2023, they discovered a number of applicants from India who got a visa, who landed up in Canada with admission letters to various colleges. And to their horror, they found that letters were all fake. And it seems there were agents in India. One of them we know about, he was from Jalandhar. So he's alleged to have issued over 700 fake college admission letters to students for exorbitant sums. And all of them happily landed there and then they got booted out. So that was one major scam of fraud that caught the eye of the administration. And unfortunately, it also coincided with the breakdown in Indo-Canadian relations. So I think all of that added up. And ever since, the number of Indian students being rejected and the number of Indian students applying as well for Canadian universities, that has been showing a steady decline.
So Manraj, is this a common occurrence? Do frauds in visa and college applications happen frequently, especially with Indian students?
It is very unfortunate, but it seems very criminal elements. You can call them criminal because they are siphoning off money from innocent students. So they seem to have gotten into this market, visa market, so-called education consultants. So somehow they manage to arrange a visa. They controvert all requirements or don't educate the students, don't make them aware of what a college would require. And there have been many instances, we have found them here at our end in India, where you realize that wrong information was given about a student just to make sure that he would get a visa. Also, and multiple times what happened is a student would go there, get his education, and then when he would apply for a job and then the double checks would begin, then the employers would realize that all of this, the basis of all what the student had done was fraudulent documents. So this became very, you can't call it rampant, but it was quite frequent. So it wasn't a once in a blue moon phenomenon. It happened quite frequently. So that also hit us because you kind of then pigeonhole Indian students into that bracket of people who are being sent by scamsters.
Right, and the Department of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada is the one that looks into this. So tell us, what changes are they making in the verification process?
So one is, I think they look at their academic qualifications very seriously, very deeply, in order to check whether the institutes from where they've done their matriculation or +2, whether these are kosher or not. And secondly, they've also started looking at the funds, because any time a student goes to Canada, he has to show a certain amount in his bank in order to assure the Canadian authorities that he or she will be able to fend for himself or herself in terms of paying the tuition fees and for making the staying arrangements as well. So in fact, the Canadian authorities also increased this fee. I think it was a couple of $1,000 and it was jacked up by several times in 2023, late 2023 or early 2024. So now what they do is they're also looking at the source of funding, because what used to happen is people would get funds transferred for a certain period from, say, a friend or a relative, and then the funds would be taken out. Now they want to ask the student where the funding is come from, the source of the funding, which has prompted many people to complain that it's almost like being interrogated. So this is something very new. It was never done before.
Right, and considering that Indians formed a major chunk of the students who went to study in Canada, has this drop in acceptances also impacted Canadian universities?
This has impacted Canadian universities and colleges in a big way. So there were, for instance, in Vancouver, in Toronto, there were colleges. Many of them, the local media would very disparagingly call them degree mills. But these were colleges which were running largely on intake of students from India. So now many of them have had to lay off their staff, cut down certain courses, completely stop certain courses because they can no longer afford the staff. Indian students had to pay much more than a Canadian student as tuition fees. So most people don't know about it, but which is why it wasn't a one-way street. Indian students were also benefiting the local economy. So they were contributing roughly $22 billion annually to Canada's economy, especially the education economy. So that has been hit very hard.
And what does the Indian embassy in Ottawa has to say about these recent developments?
So they, while acknowledging the challenges, they've said that it's not what is being made out is that very poor quality students go to Canada. So they're saying, no, that is not true. Some of the best quality students available in the world are from India, and Canadian institutions have greatly benefited from this talent. So they're saying don't put everybody in one box. There could be some outliers. There could be some black sheep, so to say. But by and large, Indian students are very serious and they are very accomplished.
And Manraj, we know that the relations between India and Canada haven't had the smoothest run lately, especially after the allegations around the killing of Sikh separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar, which further affected the student movement. So what is the current status of ties between the two countries?
So the good news is there seems to be a thaw, a very visible thaw. India has allowed Canadian diplomats, vice versa. We've got an ambassador there in place. Earlier in 2023, they had recalled their envoys from each other. So there was no diplomatic, there was a skeletal staff in the embassies in both the countries. So that is over now. It's slowly getting back to normal. And very recently, their foreign affairs minister Anita Anand, she had visited New Delhi and she had said in a statement that we want Indian students, the caveat being, but integrity first. Again, a sly, a kind of pointing to the scamsters in the system. So there seems to be a thaw, and we hope the relations will get better and better after this.
And if we talk about these students, given that Canadian acceptance rate has gone down, what other options do they have as far as studying abroad is concerned?
I think lots of students are now going to the United Kingdom, where the local colleges and universities are finding it difficult to fill up their seats. So Indian students are hugely popular there, and the student visa approvals have also gone up by 15% in the United Kingdom. And then there's Australia. So Australia has made it very clear that it wants a certain quality of students. So there also the visa approvals have gone up by 20%, which means more Indian students are heading to these countries. Then I believe Germany is also getting a lot of Indian students. Europe, countries like Spain, etc. So our people are going everywhere. See, Canada was a big draw because anybody who went to study in Canada assumed that they would study there, then they would get a job, and then they would get a permanent residency and citizenship. So this was the pathway everybody was looking at, which is why Canada was hugely popular. But now I think since they no longer guarantee jobs or a permanent residency, our students have started looking around.
And next, we turn our attention to the world of diplomacy. Last week, the United States and China agreed to strengthen communication, stabilize their bilateral ties, and more importantly, establish military communication channels to help deconflict and de-escalate any problem that may arise. This development comes not only at a time when the two countries are locked in trade tensions, but also when China has shown aggressive behavior in Ladakh and the South China Sea. To understand what this latest move means, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to the Indian Express's diplomatic affairs editor Shubhajit Roy.
Shubhajit, considering Trump's rhetoric regarding China when it comes to trade, this development might come as a surprise to some people. But can you put this into historical context?
Well, actually, it is very much in line with how US and China have dealt with each other, even during Trump's first administration. The two countries have had military level engagement and sort of a hotline where they could, in times of crisis and grave crisis, looming over the two countries and possibly which will definitely impact the world. A hotline between the defense officials, especially at the secretary or the undersecretary or the chiefs of the defense services, those channels are kept open. But yes, what was surprising was that the way the US president went about targeting China through tariffs since he came back to power in January this year, it seemed like the relationship has really nosedived to a level where there was a sort of a trade war, a tariff war going on between the two sides. Now, obviously, in that context, if you see, then it does come as a sort of contrast that, a military level communication channel and engagement has been established and agreed between the two leaders and the two countries, and now is being developed and put in place by the defense minister of China and the US defense secretary in the coming days.
And in that sense, would you say that this is similar to the situation that India finds itself in? Because again, there is a clear distinction between the rhetoric when it comes to trade and the rhetoric when it comes to military and defense.
Absolutely. It is quite similar, but obviously the sizes and the stakes are way higher when it comes to US and China. They are the two of world's biggest economies, all 5 to 6 times, 7 times bigger than India's. Their militaries are also pretty comparable, although US is ahead of China both economically and militarily, but China is a sort of a close second. So the stakes obviously are very high if there is tension between the two biggest economies and biggest militaries in the world. Then it would impact the entire world. It has impacted the entire world. In fact, in the last 9 months that we've seen since Trump came to power. So I think this is sort of seen as a welcome change, a welcome step to stabilize the relationship and to de-escalate quickly in case tensions rise in the coming days, months, weeks, and years.
And many countries, including India, have been concerned about China's aggressive behavior in the South China Sea and, of course, along the line of actual control in Ladakh. And these tensions had led to the formation of the Quad, for example. The US had come together with India, Japan, and Australia in a way to counter China's aggression. So tell us, what does this latest development mean for these countries?
Well, since the Chinese president Xi Jinping came to power, we've seen a much more muscular, much more aggressive, much more assertive China on the world stage. And that has been in full display in the South China Sea, in the Indo-Pacific, in the India-China border, and along the Indian Ocean, as well as in the Pacific Ocean. So countries like US, Japan, Australia, India, and among others have felt the heat. And we saw the border standoff and between India and China, which is still ongoing, although disengagement has happened. But 50,000 troops are still stationed on both sides. Total about 1 lakh troops are stationed along the India-China border. And similarly, the Chinese ships, Chinese vessels, Chinese submarines, they have also been patrolling and they have also been pushing the sort of limits of their territorial waters in the South China Sea as well as in other parts of the Indo-Pacific. So all this had alarmed the world and they started looking for partners and allies to take on China and act as a deterrence so that Chinese don't go into this invasion or an expansionist mode. So the Quad grouping, which was first broached in 2005, 6, 7, and then it died a death, it was revived in 2017 by President Trump, in fact, in his first term. So this particular development of US-China military engagement will obviously be watched very closely by these partners, Japan, Australia, India, and other countries in the region, for example, Philippines or Vietnam. They'll also be looking at what it means for them and how it plays out in terms of the assertive behavior by China. Does it increase? Does it again become much more expansionist? Does it become much more belligerent in their waters and claim territory that is disputed, or they stick to their lane? So I think that is the biggest sort of question that the world is wrestling with after seeing this news of strengthening of communication and setting up military to military channels between US and China.
And Shubhajit, could you give a sense of how hard is it for a country to be in a situation like this, to do this balancing act where it has a strategic partnership with China, but at the same time, it is maintaining ties with countries for whom, militarily speaking at least, China is one of the biggest concerns?
Well, it is a difficult one, but I think countries have realized that there are areas of cooperation with China. So trade, economic relationship, and China being the factory to the world, the biggest manufacturer of industrial goods across the world, has trade surpluses with countries across the world, including India or the United States. And at the same time, it has a very strong, aggressive military posture as well, which we have seen. So the contrast is very sharp. So obviously, whether be it US, whether it's Japan, whether it's Australia or India, they have to strike a balance in their relationship with China, that while you do business with China on the military domain, on the security domain, you do see each other as a rival, as a potential threat. So you have to balance these two sides of the relationship. So I think it is a tough one, but I think Trump is sort of in his second presidency is testing it once again through these moves where on one hand he launched a tariff war with China, but on the other hand is also sort of opening and making outreach to China, to Beijing, and strengthening communication at the military and the defense level.
And in the end, we talk about a train collision that killed 8 people. Yesterday, a passenger train collided with a goods train near Bilaspur railway station in Chhattisgarh, leaving at least 8 people dead and several others injured. The Indian Express's Jayaprakash S. Naidu reported that the accident happened when a passenger train coach hit a goods train at about 4 p.m. Railways said that it has moved all resources and all measures are being ensured for the treatment of the injured. Sharing details about how the accident unfolded, Bilaspur Collector Sanjay Agarwal said that the last bogie of the goods train dashed into the passenger train's first bogie. Officials said that they will share more information as the details about the situation become clearer. Chief Minister of the state, Vishnu Deosai, also responded to the accident and said, quote, "The news of the train accident near Bilaspur is very sad. After receiving information from the Bilaspur district collector, he has been given instructions regarding all possible assistance and relief work. The state government stands with the affected families during this difficult time." Unquote. An ex gratia amount of rupees 10 lakh has been announced for the families of the deceased, rupees 5 lakh for those seriously injured, and rupees 1 lakh for the passengers with minor injuries. Naidu noted that relief and rescue operations were launched soon after the incident took place. Senior railway officials reached the site to supervise operations, and the injured were shifted to nearby hospitals. The railway administration is providing all possible assistance and coordination to the affected passengers. The CPRO South East Central Railway said that a detailed inquiry will be conducted by the Commissioner of Railway Safety to ascertain the cause and recommend preventative measures. This segment was recorded at 10 p.m. last night. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank, Bhargava and me, Niharika, Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.